Chapter 3. She sits alone in a sea of stars, her body bruised and battered. She has seen many battles, and will live to see many more. She has cared for many men and women, sheltering them and guiding them on her journeys. To some she is like a mother, to others she is a guardian. To those she calls friend, she is known as the Old Girl, the Lady of Fortune, and the Queen Mother. To her enemies she has only one name, the Mistress of Pain. She is the ship, home, and base of all operations for the pirate queen, Bhakti. Bhakti sits on the command bridge of her ship, her legs folded beneath her, and reading a stack of papers. Am I reading that name correctly, Dannan, since she's the strongest right now? Alright. Her prismatic hair dances in colors as she stares intently at the plans in front of her. Her eyes shift in color as well, from green to red, and then back to green. Blood hell, this is why we never get anything done on the ship. Who wrote these plans? I can barely make them out. She looked across the table she was sitting on and at the three pirates who had joined her. Well, which one of you sorry lot did it? The Anelian could only smile, as they have a tendency of doing. The Irenian pointed a stubby finger back at the pirate queen. Come on, boss, you know just as well as we do that it was you who done it. You can't go blaming us for your ship penmanship. Bhakti glared across the table at the broad chested Irenian, who was easily a head taller than her, even if she had been standing, but he quickly averted his eyes from her gaze. Amo, haven't you ever heard of a rhetorical question? Fully aware who wrote it, I was just making fun of myself. Amo, picking up on the save, only offered her a shrug. I ain't one for knowing these things, boss. You know me. Not good for much other than lugging the big guns and occasionally backing you up in a bar fight. The Anelian could no longer contain her laughter and began giggling uncontrollably. This earned her more than a few concerned looks from the others of the command bridge. She was quickly silenced by a third pirate, a Canosian woman with brown hair pulled back into a tight ponytail, wearing a pair of spectacles and a long white coat. She removed a small device from her coat and began probing at the Anelian. Can I call this person Titty? I mean, it's really close. Is it Zitty? Well, yeah, no shit, there's an X, but is it pronounced Z or... Alright, Zitty. Zitty, perhaps you've spent too much time in the plasma chamber. I know Anelians are cheery, but I think you may be the first one to border on insanity. Zitty made her best imitation of a frown and turned to face Bhakti, who by this point had grown slightly impatient with her crew. Her hair and eyes had taken on a dark green color, and she was tapping her fingers on the table anxiously. Yeah, let's all play and joke. We're not playing on one of the most ambitious heists in the last 1,000 years. Amo ran a hand over his bald head and turned his attention back to the plans. Well, boss, it's like I told you before. Nobody's ever gone to a mausoleum ship and lived. Not even the old man thought it was a good idea. We're better off doing what we've always done, going after cargo ships and pleasure lines. Destiny building nice and good. Ain't no way we're gonna live through this. It's a fool's errand. Bhakti narrowed her almond eyes at the first mate and turned instead to her doctor. Astrid, what do you think? You're the only one around here that seems to read books. That sort of thing ever been done? Astrid pulled on her ponytail, a habit she had developed during medical school, and shook her head at the captain. With all due respect, Captain, there's just no way. You should know this. You're Destiny. Your people built these things ages ago, and they keep them pretty well up to date, and they certainly don't take grave robbing lightly. Mausoleum ships are at least 30 KILU thick, or 30 KILU in length. They're moving colonies with more than actual starships. Even if we were to penetrate the hull, which I would note is at least 500 ILU thick and lined with plasma batteries, we would have to find out which plots contain the most valuable goods. Then there's the matter of the golems. Very few people have seen them in combat, but what we've seen of order of time of golems would indicate that they're not to be trifled with, especially not what would essentially amount to a city full of them. I think we're better off taking out our usual prey, like Amo said. Bhakti glanced at the Anelian. Hang on, Phil, I need to let you know, since this is what chat's on about, med school in Ryfor is state funded. Okay? Just need to, yeah. Met in Ryfor, that's like the universe, it's state funded. Ryfor. The name of the book is Exiled, Ryfor. RAIFOR. We good? I just thought you should know since but yeah, Dannan, what state? I think I pissed him off. Anyway, Bhakti glanced at the Anelian. She was no taller than a child, but she had the eyes of a fully grown adult. When one considered the combination of her short blonde curls and rosy cheeks, she looked more like a doll than any living creature. Probably gonna regret this, but what do you think, Zitty? Zitty smiled and pointed to the plans. I think it's possible. While the Destiny are renowned shipbuilders, they are migrant people. We don't need to punch our way through the hole when we can just dock our ship and pretend we're mourners delivering a fallen loved one. Then it's simply a matter of overpowering the golems in our vicinity and making for whatever valuables we can find. Another, simpler option would be to wait in ambush for a group of legitimate mourners and confiscate whatever valuables they plan to inter their dead with. Amo visibly paled and wiped some sweat from his brow. Then there's all this business of grave robbing. Boss, you can't be serious about this. I ain't gonna call what we do honorable. Blood hell, we're pirates. But we need to make sure we don't go getting on the bad side of the Order of Time. I've heard rumors about the prisons they operate. It's the sort of place even we ain't escaping from. The Pirate Queen's hair changed again, this time to a light blue. It's not a question of whether or not we're doing it. We're doing it. Don't forget how many people on this crew are Order of the Mountain, myself included. Last thing we'd ever do is back down from a bunch of timeless old louts. Don't worry about the Order of Time. We'll handle them. I'm more concerned with the golems. What sort of weapons do they carry? What are their tactics? And are there any real accounts of drawn-out fight with them? The doctor picked up her tablet and began to scroll through it. It would appear that there have been at least a dozen occasions where groups, similar to ours, have infiltrated a mausoleum ship. In 100% of the cases, the aggressors were killed in fewer than 100 marks. I feel that it is worth mentioning how little is known of golem weapons and tactics due entirely to the fact that no one has ever seen one fight and lived to tell the tale. However, if you insist on doing this, I should mention that reports indicate at least 60% of a mausoleum ship is aetherically inert. These are just legends, but apparently if you concentrate enough aether in one place, it has the ability to rouse the dead, not something you would want on a ship full of corpses. Bhakti smiled through her disappointment. While that meant her abilities as a magus would be rendered useless in most of the ship, it also presented an opportunity to cause a distraction. So how are we going to... In the middle of her sentence, Bhakti was thrown from the table by an unseen force. She hit the floor with a thud, and before she could regain her footing, she was thrown again into a console. She felt the force of the second impact far worse than the first, as it took her in the ribs. Bhakti searched the room for an unseen assailant, but instead saw the rest of her bridge crew in distress. Amo had his hands firmly clutched to the table, and Ziddy was holding onto his leg. The doctor had conveniently fallen into the command chair, and was now clinging to the arms searching for an explanation. Bhakti braced herself for a third impact, but it did not come. She slowly stood to her feet, and realized the ringing in her ears for the first time. Blood hell, what was that? Report. Ziddy popped up, a smile still on her face, and ran to the nearest console. Explosions, Captain. I have readings of one in the forward engine room and a second in the plasma chamber. The plasma chamber looks to have absorbed most of the energy from the explosion, but we're dead in space right now without the engines. She tapped on the console a few times and made her best imitation of a furrowed brow. Not good, this isn't good at all. Bhakti shook her head and tried to focus on what Ziddy was doing, but she felt dizzy and disoriented. She placed one hand on her head and the second on a table to steady herself. Well, what's not good? The doctor stood up and began scanning her with a handheld device. Without the engines to output the excess energy in the plasma chamber, it will keep building up. The chamber is designed to generate energy perpetually, but it lacks an off switch. If we don't find a way to use more energy, they will overload. That sort of explosion would cut the Queen Mother in two. Ziddy began frantically tapping at buttons on the console. We also have reports of ancillary damage to our weapons and sensors. Bhakti felt her head spin and dropped her head to the table. She noticed the ship's klaxon blaring for the first time. Shut that damn thing off. Doc, what the hell's wrong with me? Astrid continued to scan her and looked to her tablet. It's only a mild concussion. You fell off the table pretty hard, Captain. It's nothing a few days' rest won't take care of. Then again, when have you ever been one to take my advice? Bhakti shrugged and turned to Ziddy. What caused it? Do we know yet, Ziddy? Ziddy continued to frantically scroll through the console. Internal source, Captain. It would appear that whatever caused the explosions wasn't a malfunction. I think we may have a saboteur on board. Amo! Bhakti felt her legs grow weak and fell back into her command chair. She looked up for the large man. He had already left the bridge. She grabbed the arms of the chair and pushed herself up into the outstretched arm of the doctor. As a ship's doctor, I would recommend that you stay here. You're in no condition to go looking for trouble. Bhakti let out a laugh, which took out more of her than she thought it would. This is nothing. You should have seen me during my days as a man-at-arms. You probably would have passed out from the stress if you knew what they were putting on my body through on those days. Now let me go. I'll be fine. She pushed past the doctor, the sudden force throwing her off balance. She stumbled forward and caught herself on a wall. Then she forced herself steady and began to run down the hallway towards the location of the explosion. By now, Ziddy would have already deployed the repair drones, and most of the fires would be under control. Amo! She called out for him as she ran down the corridor in the direction of the forward engine room. She was met by the distinct sound of a blaster being fired, and by instinct, she dropped to her knees as the bolt hit the wall behind her, exactly where her head would have been. This wasn't the first time the Pirate Queen had an attempt on her life, and it certainly wouldn't be the last, but she was usually up for the challenge. Before she could react, the assassin was nearly on top of her. She caught a glimpse of its shaped blade dancing through the smoke and the distinct click of aether steel armor boots against the floor. She ducked her head to the side as the shade blade sliced through the air above her harmlessly. She rolled away from the attacker and pushed herself onto her feet. A sudden movement sent her head swimming, and suddenly there were two assassins when there was only one. The assassin saw that she was disoriented and started to laugh. The laugh was distinctly female, with the feral hint of a Saku. You know, I thought the famous pirate queen would put up more of a fight. I think the ship would be much harder to infiltrate, let alone disable. I suppose it's just an old piece of junk, though. Bhakti thought she recognized the voice and squinted to make out the insignia on the Aether Steel armor. Leland Zen, what the hell are you doing on my ship? She took a deep breath, and her training began to come to her. She started seeking the Aether in her blood. Oh, you know, just your everyday run-of-the-mill assassination. You finally pissed off the wrong lot, Pirate Queen. I'm not sure who was willing to put these many credits out on you. I'm not surprised about it, though. In fact, the only real shock here is that I was the first one to try to collect on the bounty. By the looks of it, I'll be the last. Bhakti felt her blood burning. Her muscles were growing stronger and her vision sharper. She felt the headache soothing and balled her hands into a fist. Certainly not the first person to try to collect on a bounty on my head. Who put up this one, then? One of the corporations? Some pleasure line that isn't too happy about my latest exploits? Maybe I jilted an old lover. I've heard all of the stories. Anonymous. I guess whoever you did piss off doesn't want to risk you coming after them. As if there's a chance of that, though. Leland twirled her che blade playfully in one hand and had her plasma pistol trained on Bhakti with the other. The only stipulation was to bring you in, dead or alive. The bounty hunter didn't give Bhakti the chance to respond. She opened fire once the last word left her maw. Bhakti clicked on the Aether around her and dashed to the side. Tattoos on her neck and back began to glow green, and she had her prey in her sights. Her legs were like powerful springs beneath her, and she used them to push herself towards Leland. The Aether Steel armor Leland wore was enough to protect her from che blades, explosions, plasma bolts, and radiation. Bhakti knew this and ignored it all as she channeled her Aether into her fist and threw it into the gut of the bounty hunter. The force of the punch caused a dent in the armor and sent a shockwave through Leland's body. The bounty hunter dropped to the ground. Her playful words and taunting were replaced only by a gurgling sound. Bhakti knelt down and removed her helmet. She liked to see the looks in the eyes of the people she killed. She reached over and took the pistol from the hands of the hunter. Leland's eyes were wide open in shock. A trail of blood tricked from her maw, and her eyes were focused on the ceiling. She whispered only one word: mountain. Bhakti smiled. The Aether within her had returned to its normal levels, and the burning tattoos on her back had cooled. The sudden rush caused her to stumble slightly. She steadied herself and put the pistol to Leyland's head. Yes, dear, I'm one of those. It's not exactly a closely guarded secret. Well, you know we all make mistakes. It's the problem with being a freelance merc. Sometimes you miss details that could have saved your life. That's why I chose to be a pirate. Enough about me, though. You know they say every bad deed can be forgiven at least once. Unfortunately for you, Bhakti pulled the trigger, and there was a small soldering hole in the head of the Saku. I'm not very forgiven. The full pain of her head injury hit her all at once. This was the biggest downfall of the Mountain Magus. Unlike the other orders which gathered Aether from outside sources, the Order of the Mountain used the Aether stored in the blood and amplified it. This gave an increase in speed, strength, and perception, but once the Aether was used, it meant any injury they were suffering or suffered would hit them with an equal increase. Bhakti felt dizzy, and then she felt her morning meal rise from her stomach and end up on the floor. She tried to find her feet, but the entire ship spun, and she collapsed in a heap on top of Leyland's corpse. When she opened her eyes, she was being carried by a pair of strong arms. Amo? Yeah, boss. Doc says to take you to your quarters. She says she's not sure how you managed to kill a bounty hunter in your condition. You just need to get some rest. Amo opened her door and set her down on her bed. Don't worry about the ships that are coming in. Ziddy and I can handle it. I also took care of a couple of other mercs that snuck in. I don't think Leland was working alone. Don't worry about it, though. Like I said, we can handle it. You just get some rest. Ships? What ships? She felt a sudden rush of adrenaline, tried to get out of bed, but the ship spun again, and she collapsed. Ow! She felt darkness take her as the klaxons began to sound again. That's it.